It was not but a couple weeks ago when Joyo and I were watching Star Wars together with a group of females who have never seen Star Wars before. I constantly brag about Star Wars to the public, the original 6 that is, and the prequels and the originals, and people who say they've never seen Star Wars on the surface only see it as a little, like, boom boom pow, a big old boom boom show, and frankly, something for nerds. But growing up, and for a lot of people who are fans of Star Wars, when you actually go through the initial 6 at the very least, that's my position, you come to find that this isn't some sort of Battlestar Galactica, sorry Battlestar Galactica fans, Battlestar Galactica nerd fest of some sort, for where the focus is supposed to be on the big boom boom, but the underlying tones of the narrative that pushes the plot forward and makes it so interesting, that without it, the graphics and the boom booms mean nothing. So today's topic, as Joyo so willingly suggested, is when does art become entertainment? Because now more than ever is Star Wars in the midst of controversy and having an identity crisis of what it wishes to focus on when it comes to story and entertainment. Is it even art anymore, or is it simply flashy big boom booms? This is the Spoiled Onion Show, and I am Brandon, and this is our co-host, Joyo.
Yo, what's up, everybody? Thank you for joining us today. This is exciting. This is a change of direction, and yeah, let's just jump into it.
Joyo, where do you stand on the matter, right? You're the one who brought this up initially, and I found it to be a little bit fascinating here, because I find the original 6 to be immensely focused as being artistic. However, even with the prequels, I can see this transition for where Star Wars turns into entertainment. But before we even go jumping ahead, I think it's important that we establish some definitions here. What do we mean? What do we mean by art? What do we mean by entertainment?
Yeah, well, that's just a hard question, as it is, because as anyone will tell you, the definition of art is very relative to the person perceiving the medium as art. So I think when we're talking about art in this podcast episode, we're meaning films that reflect on something greater than themselves, that aren't just intended to make money or just intended to entertain for the time being, but they provoke the audience into asking larger questions, examining their own lives in contrast to the main characters, and really sticking with the viewer for a long amount of time. And as you guys know, Star Wars has been around for quite some time, if not one of the longest franchises to have existed, and existed profitably. So I think all of those things come into play when we talk about what is art. And then when entertainment comes in, we're talking about losing those qualities and it becoming simply a popcorn eating fest and the like.
Yeah, it's as you're talking, even I'm having to determine or differentiate the difference between the two things, like art and entertainment, because we can apply things like art on things like painting and sculptures and all this such, but not many people would say that those things are necessarily in themselves entertaining, right? Maybe making it is entertaining for an individual, but looking upon a painting is not what one generally counts as being an entertaining experience, as it is, a critical experience.
Right.
But what changes when it comes from being a photo or a song, and then what ends up going into film? What stops it from being art, and what makes something just entertaining, right? Even theater shows, one could say, is entertaining, right? So it's almost as if the act itself, the act of different maybe plot points, maybe concepts of what is known to be effective to the individual, rather than try to put a certain point out. Because I guess art, oftentimes what makes art, like you said, is so subjective, but what makes art so impactful or meaningful or good, as society might put it, is how it moves someone into places in their mind or what they're thinking of it than they would normally. What I mean by that is, like, if you look at a sculpture, Does it pull your mind to a certain direction? Are you fascinated? Is it intriguing? Is there a self-reflection from it? If you go to there's a lot of movies out there for where none of that is occurring, but you're just seeing things move around and it makes you smile and go woohoo, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, what point? What do we mean by something being more artistic and something being more entertaining?
I think it just comes down to kind of the idiom that says, I don't know how to describe it, but I know it when I see it. And I think that's in largely what art is. I mean, people are going to look at Star Wars. I've met people who don't care two licks about Star Wars. And then I know other people who grew up with it. And
2 licks!
2 licks, man.
2
licks. Maybe 1 lick. See, 1 lick, I don't know. Maybe they care that much, but 2 licks is going too far.
1 lick, 2 lick. I wonder where that came from.
It's the lick scale.
We'll have to devote another video to that.
Yeah, there's
the lick scale.
Mm-hmm. It's a 1 to 10 lick scale, and they don't care at 2 licks, which is 2+ licks.
Holy cow! That's not that many licks.
It's not a lot for sure.
Sheesh.
But yeah, I think it's just going to come down to you guys as the audience, and I mean we're both going to have opinions. I feel, if I may, I am extremely unique in my opinions towards Star Wars as to whether it's something monumental or something that just ruined movies as they are, because I grew up with it. I loved them as a kid. I loved watching episode 4, 5, and 6. And then when I was a kid, obviously the prequels came out, which was exciting. But I never sold my soul to it like some people do. So,
like me.
Exactly.
The original 6, that is.
Yeah, Brandon was weeping during the movie. I was like, oh, okay.
I did in episode 3. Okay, I'm gonna tell you right now. Episode 3. I was 6 years old when I went to. I might be wrong about that. I might have been 8, but I was very young when I saw that in theaters. It was one of the oldest movie-going experiences I ever had. I cried as a child when I saw Anakin burning. All right, episode 6. We were watching it the other day. I was weeping because it's been so long, and seeing all these other people's genuine first-time reactions, I'm all like, yes, this is what it's about. This is what it's about. We're talking about some raw narrative. The ones who initialized these type of aspects in movies. Mm-hmm. But Joyo, I guess sees some flaws here and there, or a negative impact. Would you say?
Well, I don't know if it's even that. It's just that I was never like totally consumed by it. I loved it. I enjoyed it. But there are other movies in the world, so it's just something. But anyway, we've hashed out we've hashed out that art and entertainment is really up to you guys. And it's up to us for ourselves to decide. So why don't we start talking about Star Wars in that light? I mean, I know how you feel about it. So why don't you dive us in with the art versus entertainment aspect?
Sure. This is where I get very elaborate. Hold on. Let me put on my glasses. Right. So, Star Wars, which I believe came out in 1977, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct.
Right? It took advantage of what was, I would say, I can't say revolutionary because they've been used before, right? Things like the green screens and whatnot, and starting to work these things together, right? But for such a low budget and with so little people believing in it, and for the editing process, for it to come out the way that it did, is monumental. And everybody who ended up seeing it and all the money that it made, the companies, right, I believe it was Fox at the time, was like, wow, hey, you struck gold with this, and you did it at a pretty cheap cost. Let's reinvest into this, right? So what was at first a bunch of people that were, fitting things together, what they had, what was left in the Lego bin, became a lot more organized. And George Lucas wasn't even the director anymore. He was only the director for episode 4, and then for 5, it was another person. Even the writer was a different person, right? George Lucas just led the narrative. He would advise them what he's wanting. Somebody else is writing. Same thing for episode 6, a different director and somebody else who's writing, going in the direction for where George wants it. George is just producing the entire thing and is focused on the toys. I guess, because the reason I say this, though, is because when we go into the prequel era, the narrative, although I find to be still complex, is being balanced with what I believe is George Lucas's desire to make something very marketable. And many of the plot points that are created are purposefully there to create toys or video games or whatever that might be. Now, I enjoy that, but I also see for where what started as, a little bit of a fun way to get these things on the shelves of Walmart became what I'd say is the sequels in Disney Star Wars. Now, I get it. There's some people out there who like Disney Star Wars. And it's okay to be wrong. But but I look, I think there are a lot of ideas that were within Disney Star Wars that were good, that because of the disorganization, right? And what was being prioritized with the men in the suits behind the production, was actually the wrong way to go with it. That what was originally artistic, or what was considered the most artistic elements of Star Wars, was not what was focused on, and rather what was the most entertaining. And there was a difference, because there's nothing necessarily entertaining about hearing the words of son redeems father. That's not in and of itself entertaining. It's what's put on the screen and how it's formulated that makes it become entertaining, right? Well, when you lose the definitions of the scene, and the art, what I would say, is the expression of that crisis, is lost, but you kept what you thought was visually entertaining, you end up with something a little bland, a little bleak. And what made Star Wars so much different than what I would say is other sci-fi, was lost. I thought, why I loved Star Wars and why I think the originals and the prequels, to a good extent, were so good, were because of the underlying narrative. And it's such a good underlying narrative in what ideas it was trying to propose, and values and morals and whatnot, were so grand that it went beyond even the entertaining aspects, and frankly even the flaws that many people could see in the prequels, because it was so focused in bringing about a certain narrative and a certain moral and a certain virtue. The sequels, and I'd say even the spin-offs, I don't know if they value that as much. I see a personal redirection going on with The Mandalorian, but I think the reason that that's possible is because the people running The Mandalorian are at a lower production scale than that. You'd think it'd be the other way around, but it's not. It's a lower production scale than that of the mainline movies, and that gave the people in control of it less to work with, less money, and more time to focus in on what's going to captivate the audience, because nobody's demanding you to watch the show. But every every channel on television is saying Star Wars Episode 8, Star Wars Episode 9. Mm-hmm. They don't have the money to market this Disney Plus show. So they have to make it good. They have time, and they have passionate people on it, and they don't have the same producers and investors. And that's where I see some of those narratives, what I call the artistic element of Star Wars, come back into the light. Hopefully it stays that way.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think, too, what you said about earlier with a lot of the groundbreaking things they used in the original trilogy, it's true. If you watch it, there's nothing that comes close to the special effects within Star Wars that was produced around that same time period. It's just crazy good. Right. And I think the storyline was super, it felt fresh, right? Because nothing is actually an original idea anymore. But it took such a fresh perspective on it that it felt so brand new and so well put together. Nothing felt contrived. Everything felt like it flowed together. Just the smallest things, like the names of planets, everything just seamlessly combined. And I also think it came about at a time when people were ready for sci-fi. We were moving out of that more traditional Hollywood movie period. So it really was an art in that it redefined things. It was creative. It had George Lucas's energy in it. It had these young actors and actresses who were also passionate about the project, and it really captured the minds of a culture that, we were coming out of the 50s, which was prosperous. Now we're in the 70s, which is more like flamboyant, and I'm just going to do my own thing. And it really captured minds in that sense. And I think when you get to the prequels, again, people are going to have their issues with it, but you're still retaining that creative energy. You're still making use of groundbreaking visuals like CGI, and it feels still fresh, even though a little more contrived, maybe. I mean, Jar Jar, he's a little contrived, but and then you come now into the sequels, which are what they are. They just feel like I'm sure we're going to talk more about it, but The Mandalorian, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because it returns back to that originality, right? I don't feel as if when I watch it, I'm watching something that's been rehashed over and over again. It feels fresh, it feels new, and it feels like it's retaining that Star Wars creativity that Lucas started in the first place, which is exciting. And I think Disney's recognizing that they were stupid, and they're taking a step back and kind of replanning their strategy out, which is cool.
Hopefully. Because, hey, let me use specific examples, right? Get over here. Get over here.
Okay.
Joseph.
All right, I'm coming. Oh,
right. Thank you.
Ooh, that's warm. Got a fire going on here. Hey, can you pass the marshmallows for my hot chocolate?
Yeah, sure.
Plunk.
Thank you. There you go. Look. There is absolutely no reason that the Emperor was in Episode 9. Now, look. I don't even. This isn't even a controversial thing. Nobody. I don't know anybody. I can't wait to see this comment section. I don't know anybody who said, yeah, that made sense. That was perfectly placed there. Narratively, perfect. No. Because even if you were, the way they went about it was so insane. And I only have the pride of being able to say it like this. And know that it wasn't some sort of undertone or artistic decision, because we find out in the behind the scenes and by the actors that they didn't even know they were going to use the Emperor until the middle of the production. It's like, what in the world was this movie about to be? Who's running this joint? How many times do we hear this? And don't get me started on the Han Solo problem, right? With its production. That was the craziest one, its production problems. But this one, it's just like there wasn't even a change of directors. There was a change of writers and directors before they got started. But once they got started, it was the same guy the whole way through. What's going on here? Who's saying yes and no to what? In the way that, let me put it like this. The Emperor is only there for the sake of what I would say is entertainment. There is no plot within these movies leading up to this point that would suggest that this was the natural next step. In the prequels, I understand that there are a lot of decisions that are made that are only made in the name of entertainment, yet it doesn't take away from the narrative. It still makes sense in and of its own narrative. Yoda having a lightsaber and fighting may have been only an entertainment decision. Mm-hmm. That may seem like, okay, that's a little much. He's a little guy, I mean, really, but a lot of people wanted to see it. So we shove that in there with Count Dooku, and maybe they wanted to see Yoda fight the Emperor, right? We'll shove that in there too. It looks awesome. It looks crazy. That's the entertainment side. I wouldn't have expected it, but it doesn't go against the narrative that was previously established. The sequels, it almost seems as if it doesn't care about the narrative previously established, and that's what I'm saying is that they think. I say they. Lucasfilm now, or for the last few movies, think, without George Lucas, that Star Wars is good because of the big boom booms. That a Death Star is so awesome because it blows up planets, not because of what it entails when it comes to the narrative.
Yeah.
But that's not true. It is cool because of what it does, right? The AT-AT walkers only make sense or only bring about the tension because of what it meant for the people on Hoth when they were getting off the snow planet. They were slowly approaching. Han and Leia are still there. Will they make it out? Luke is fighting them. All this stuff. That's it doesn't even make sense in a technological sense, but it makes sense narratively. Episode 8 throws those in there, and it doesn't really have a reason why. It just does. Yeah. They just put it there thinking that that's what made Star Wars good, and that's not what made it good. And even more so, they're hitting the same beats almost as if we didn't already understand these things. That imagine if I wrote a story one day about a man goes and gets a pail from a house and brings it back to his mother. It's a boring story, but what's worse is that I write a sequel about a different man. In fact, it's a woman who goes to a house and gets a pail, not a bucket, but a pail from a hotel and brings it back to his house. There is no different story here. And changing the look of it didn't serve its purpose. And frankly, it made even people like myself unexcited to see what was next, because there's nothing impressive about big boom booms anymore. That's, I think, what the end of this ends up coming to is that now CGI and animation, special effects, has come to the point for where I am not impressed by just it in and of itself. You know, me seeing all these things happening in the Avengers movies, Star Trek, Star Wars, everything. It's almost expected at this point. So the only way you're going to draw me in is it to be the narrative itself that is behind all these big boom booms, right? I've been saying boom boom a lot. Man, there's a lot of boom booms.
Boom boom. We're going to have to put like sound edit of real boom booms every time you say it.
Big
pew, pew,
boom,
like the blaster sound.
we got to use the Django the Django.
Exactly.
The big boom.
Yes. But yeah, you know, I think you struck it on the head when you talked about originality. That is my biggest complaint with this new series, right? Episode 7 is an exact copy of Episode 4. And I tell this to people, like, I'm all excited when I tell this to people because I'm like, ha, I got you, right? Star Wars fan, I got you. And I literally had someone comment back and say, well, nothing's original, so, you know... And I'm like, that doesn't matter. It didn't feel original. It's obvious it's a copy. And
yeah, you were saying it before, is that no, of course, certain narratives can't be replicated, but this is its own series that's replicating its own series.
Right, and the audience can feel that what the producers and directors are doing is simply... it's a lack of confidence in their own ability to create something additional to the Star Wars saga. And instead, they're constantly returning back to the original trilogies. That's why we constantly have legacy figures like Han Solo and Leia and Luke. And then the Emperor, of all people. Right. It's like, you totally dismantle the plot of Episode 6 by bringing him back then. It makes no sense.
Or the prequels. It dismantles everything.
It's just crazy. And while you could say that Star Wars started to turn more into entertainment with the prequels because of that consumable factor that Lucas put in.
Sure.
It really reaches its pinnacle in these films that just don't know what to do with themselves anymore. And everything new that they throw in there feels contrived. Like Episode 7, that little alien woman, it's just like, it was supposed to be some new creature.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and it just feels like...
Maz Kanata.
Yeah, it feels like some just made-up Yoda... duplicate that's, Walmart brand.
Everything. That bar is clearly the Mos Eisley thing. And they're admitting that, too. They admit that that's what they did. It's just like, I'm not impressed, okay?
But let me ask you this, right?
Right,
because it worked. They made a ton of money. And a lot of people were happy, right? So, but here's the thing.
Yeah, the majority of people were, yes.
The majority of people were, but even still, after Episode 7, there was no question that most people were happy, right? And that was a copy.
Sure, I'd say 70%. I'd say 70% of people were happy.
Okay, and it made like...
I remember back then, people were still... it was controversial, but then Episode 8 happened, and it made people feel like, wow...
Right, but here's the question. Episode 8 arguably is the one that kind of went on a limb and started doing things a little different. So someone could listen to this podcast and argue, well, they tried doing something different and it didn't work, right?
Right.
So, like, what are your thoughts on that?
Actually, I would agree. I would absolutely agree. The thing about Episode 8 is that, and some people are going to get on me about this, when I left the theater, I was satisfied. When I saw Episode 8. It's weird what happened.
Yeah.
And maybe there's a psychology with it. Is that although I was sad that Luke is potentially dead, and he was, but that things ended the way it was, I was just like, sheesh, this is so sad. It's crazy, right? But it did, unlike Episode 7, end up doing things that it ended in a position for where I was like, well, now we can start getting into an original place now. Mm-hmm. This is starting to get its own identity. And it made me think that, okay, yeah, sure. This feels like the second to last one. This feels like it's leading to something really huge, right? But then I started really thinking about it as weeks passed. And what ended up ruining the movie, right? Because it did try to make, even though it stole some other ideas here and there, right? With the AT-AT walkers, whatever. Even though it had its unique scenes and qualities and developed certain areas that I actually liked that they developed, what it did to the narrative of what was previously established was what was getting people so upset, right? People don't like that Luke became what he did. And when I thought about it more, I realized, oh no, wait, this may not be a good thing, right? Or what Yoda did, or how the Supreme Leader was just what he was in that film, right? And what was being what people were hanging on to, the ones who do like it, is that, well, this is building up to something more. And we want to see what happens in 9 before we make a lot of more, conclusions, right? Because they have something planned out, they have it. That's not true. And even when we look at the script of what was being written by the person directing 9, it was also disconnected from even the last movie. It's like every director did not care about what the other director was doing. And none of them had a cohesive story or narrative, right? And frankly, I'm glad that they gave it to JJ, because the other one actually looks even worse. Even though I like some of the ideas that he had, and going to Coruscant, it's like, all right, that's cool and all, but it was even worse, just killing Kylo. And I'm like, wow, what a story. What a grand story, right? But at the same time, the Emperor is a joke too. That's a joke too. And I think they all just really messed each other up. And it's like, this is not what we should expect from the biggest entertainment company on the history of all space and time, right? This is ridiculous. Working with what was the most famous narrative sci-fi film industry in the history of all space and time. So, you start talking, because I'm having a stroke.
Well, I just find it curious, right? Because that sticks with me a lot. And you could argue that 8 was, did some damage or whatever, and people were upset about it. But it still went on a limb and did something different. And I think anyone would say that Episode 7 was the best one. And I think Episode 7 was the one that was the clearest copy. There was like zero originality to it. So I have to reflect on this, because this is a question that keeps coming up in our time, especially with the Marvel movies, especially with the Star Wars movies, especially with almost every movie coming out is a sequel, is a remake, is some kind of derivative spin-off of something. So is our culture coming to the point where originality is frowned upon, and we just want more of what we liked before, right? That is my question. And to even preface it further, I read articles. I was one who would complain that we were not getting any original movies, and I'm always like, I wish they'd bring some originality back. But then I would read articles where it's like, this movie was completely original, and it made like $2 million in its opening weekend at the box office, and this movie was original and it made $5 million and hasn't been doing well, right? So it's almost as if our culture is ignoring those movies entirely. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So everybody at home, I'm developing a film right now too. I'm a producer. It's nothing huge scale, something that I put online for free. But it's hopefully going to become a web series. The thing that I have to even watch out for is this idea. I got to catch myself, because I too start copying ideas that I've already seen in other narratives, and I'm like, wait a minute, all right, for this to be able to stand out on its own and to be its own thing, something that will stick with the audience long after they're gone, it has to be unique in some ways. That doesn't mean, at the expense of the plot, for where you do something completely unexpected and you just tank the whole thing, right? It's just like, well, that wasn't even a good story. But you also don't want to just recreate Star Wars or something like that. You don't want to have a redemption story that's the same as every other one. Like, what makes yours unique that somebody would want to watch yours rather than that one, right? Rather than Zuko, rather than Darth Vader's, right? Why should I look at that, right? Which mine isn't necessarily a redemption story, but, as a series, that happens all the time in narratives, these redemptions, right? And they're interesting characters. The same way, though, is that in mainstream Hollywood, are people one day gonna say enough? Are people gonna say, I don't want to see the same stories anymore? I don't want to see the same, gimmicks anymore. I want to see something fresh and new. I want to feel something, and I want that something to be more than just the awe that's felt when a laser hits another laser.
Yeah. Well, I think we have a unique problem simply because we have all these franchises that have been established. I think if you look at movies in the 70s and 80s, it was a lot of experimentation, right? That's where Star Wars was born. That's where Blade Runner was born. That's where Indiana Jones was born. I mean, almost everything we have today, Alien, you name it, it came from the 70s. Right. It came from the 80s. So that was a great time.
Interesting point.
Yeah, it was a great time of creative experimentation. Carried into the 90s a little bit, though I'd consider the 90s a little dead. And then you came into the 2000s where studios cared less about experimenting to find the next best thing and more about capitalizing on what they already had. And this is a unique problem because we've never had such a library of successful movies before to build on. And I really do think people are going to get sick of it. I think people are already getting sick of remakes that, I mean, just look at a lot of the remakes. They fail, right? I mean, they made a Hellboy remake like a year ago that just tanked. So I think studios are going to learn that people just don't care about their remakes anymore, and I think it will change. I think it's in time we'll come back into a new age of creativity.
Well, I also think that just as the investors, the audience is less forgiving nowadays. When you make a bad movie, you may never make that movie ever again. Sadly, they're never going to make a Hellboy movie probably ever again. Oof. Unless they wait another decade, maybe they'll give it another shot. But that one shot that they just had, I hadn't seen the movie, but it didn't even look good from the trailers. Right. And that's when you usually see what's better than, better marketably than what's in the film. Right. It's just, or like Daredevil, right? Daredevil has one movie for where the audience doesn't think it's the best thing in the universe, and so he never gets a movie again. You just you reduce him to only a show, and never even speak of him in any other way.
Fair. I mean, it is what it is. But maybe it's an opportunity to come up with new ideas, fresh ideas, to take advantage of what's been done. And I think even with what we have, even with Marvel movies and Star Wars movies, the audience is frowning upon this lack of originality. And I think, like movies like Joker that did real well. I mean, you can argue all day whether Joker was artistic or not, but the reality is it was something really fresh and it did really well. Yeah. So I think it's changing. I think we're moving into a realization that you have to actually make a good movie to have a good movie. It can't just be, you can't just slap Batman on the title and then you're good,
Well, we'll see with this summer's coming, The Batman. Now in theaters. Get your tickets. Well, I don't even know when that movie's coming out. Are they even done filming? Robert Pattinson got COVID.
I know. But, I mean, he's probably recovered by now. He looks strapping and young.
Hey, by the way, I don't think we're allowed to say COVID on YouTube, so you might need to cut that part out.
Yeah, you're probably right. Okay. But, to take it back, I think the Han Solo movie is a good example, right? It came after episode 8, right? Am I mistaken in that?
Yeah.
Okay, it came like half a year after episode 8. Wasn't very well marketed. Right. They put like the minimal amount of effort in it. There was tons of production issues. And what happened? It didn't do well. Right?
Right.
So just because you slapped Star Wars on it doesn't mean it will do well. And I think, by then they probably already had episode 9 in the works, so it was too late to do any drastic changes. But I think now Disney, the light bulb has clicked on and they're like, oh crap, we actually have to make a good movie. So,
Yeah, I don't know. I think they're willing to trust more the writers that are what they're wanting to do, the ones who know things about Star Wars and what made Star Wars artistic and unique in and of its own style. Yeah. That's not the same as Avengers. What makes Star Wars entertaining is not the same thing as what makes Avengers entertaining for people, right? These are different feels. These are different moods and tones. And that doesn't make it less entertaining. What's going to be important is that artistically it stands out as something that somebody would want to add to their palette of what they consume. I can read a comic book, I can read a book, and I can watch a cartoon, and I can watch a movie. And all those things are entertaining, very entertaining, but they're not the same at all. And the means in which I ingest that entertainment is different, and that's okay. I look forward to what Star Wars is going to do. They announced a lot of things.
Yes.
It gets me concerned. Some of them make me excited. It seems a little ambitious. Speaking of reboots, they're not rebooting. They're making the last Indiana Jones. I thought they were going to reboot it. No, they're having Harrison Ford come back for another and last Indiana Jones. I have no idea how they're going to do that.
He's going to be in a wheelchair the whole time, just like...
Frankly, yeah, I mean, it's just like, holy...
Well, wait, though.
Holy cow.
I read something that said they're going to be setting up spin-offs in that movie. It's never the end. It's never the end.
What in the world could they possibly spin? I know what it's going to be like a daughter. It's going to be his daughter, and her name's going to be Indiana also, because it's
gender neutral. I just want like a short round series where Short Round's doing crazy stuff in China or something. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, with the actor who played Glenn in The Walking Dead. Photo on the screen.
Okay, there you go. I don't know who that is, but whatever. All right, cool. Well, I think we're good. Did you have anything to say? Closing remarks?
No. I made my case. Well, here, this is what I'll say. Yeah, see, look at that. This is what I'll say. Star Wars is good. The complete saga. The Skywalker saga, I don't think so. But I think what will bring things like Star Wars, and if Marvel wants to save itself, or DC, which DC could be its own discussion, but what will save Star Wars from itself is if it clings on to what made the originals so good, and it's not that specific narrative, it's not those specific stormtroopers, right? It is creating a story that is relatable in our world, using a setting that is foreign, so that when we look upon it, we don't have the same attachments that we have experienced in our own lives, that we might be able to look at it, return and reflect on our own lives, and be able to get something very unique, something very powerful, that although it's a distant world, that it's all still the same, right? The same problems, the same conflicts. I think Star Wars is metaphorical to many things that happen within our own lives, and I think it makes virtuous commentaries on those things. If everything I just said isn't in the discussion of when making these new shows and movies, there's no hope, and this is gonna stink, and Star Wars is gonna die. If it is talked about, if it's cared about, then Star Wars can live forever. But it's one thing that's for certain is that it's going to die. It will end one day. It will. So how are you going to end it? On a good note, for where you said, we told our story, we expressed what this universe artistically should express? Or did you let it die out where people don't like it, people don't care about it anymore, people don't want to see it? And at that point, will anybody even care about the original Star Wars at that point? These are the questions.